Well, I want to welcome you this morning to Grows Here news conference. And I want to set the stage just a little bit. And by the way, I'm Mark McCarg, President of Nebraska Farm Bureau, but most importantly, farmer in Central City, Nebraska. We grow corn, soybeans, popcorn, have a hog operation there. You know, freedom means different things to all of us. And those in agriculture, it often means being able to do what we want and what we need to support our families and our farm and our community and our country. But many times, freedom gets fuzzy when people start pushing back and try to limit our freedoms or actually take our freedoms away. And unfortunately, it seems like lately there are a lot of issues being pushed down from Washington, D.C. that wants to limit our freedoms and hurt our farm and ranch and businesses. I'm proud to stand here with Governor Ricketts, Congressman Don Bacon, other Nebraskan and Nebraskan organizations that have come together today to hit some of these issues straight on. And even though they're not able to be here today, we also have the support of all the rest of the congressional representatives that represent Nebraska. The things that they're representing us today are in federal tax hikes that are increasing capital gains on farms and businesses through the elimination of stepped-up basis. And I probably don't have to explain it to this group today, but stepped-up basis is a key provision that allows farms and ranches to pass on to the next generation our businesses and farms without facing huge tax consequences that would potentially force them to sell part of their farm or part of their business. Just a quick straw poll. How many people that are standing out there that are involved in a business or agriculture that have stepped up basis went away would not affect them financially? How many would it affect financially if stepped up basis went away? Absolutely. Well, maybe you guys all should have a conversation with Secretary Vilsack. He came out on Friday or in a Wall Street Journal op-ed that if stepped-up basis went through or was eliminated, that it would not affect, given the current provisions, agriculture and businesses. That is just absolutely not true. And we're going to talk about that this morning. We're also here to oppose EPA's efforts to rewrite President Trump's Navigable Waters rule. We're greatly concerned about EPA's plan to rewrite WOTUS rule that would take us backwards in time. It would take us to a time of uncertainty. It would also lead us forward in the federal government's continued overreach into agriculture, into the water conversation, and we just can't let that happen. But what I'm extremely proud of this morning is that we have a governor in Nebraska that absolutely understands this. I don't really have to introduce you probably to the governor. He's been our governor for nearly 7 years, and I can tell you from personal experience in traveling with the governor around both Nebraska and the country and the world, that the governor doesn't just talk about agriculture when he's in front of an agriculture crowd. The governor talks about agriculture every place he goes, and he understands fully that agriculture is the backbone of Nebraska. So Governor Ricketts.
Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you to the Farm Bureau for all that you do to support Nebraska agriculture. As Mark was indicating, agriculture is the heart and soul of what we do here in Nebraska. This is what drives our economy. And yet we see that the Biden administration seems intent upon undermining agriculture here in our state. Whether it's the lack of support for the ethanol industry and making sure we have a robust renewable fuel standard, or the 30 by 30 plan, which would devastate our small towns and rural communities, the Biden administration has not been thoughtful about how to support agriculture. And we see it again with the two things we're here to talk about today. The waters of the U.S. is an issue that we started fighting under the Obama administration. And again, the Farm Bureau was there to stand up against that bad rule. And you may recall at that time the EPA was trying to extend their authority unlawfully to be able to regulate things like ponds on farms or puddles on construction sites or roadside ditches. And working together with other states, Nebraska was able to take the EPA to court and get an injunction against the implementation of that rule. And generally you get that implementation of an injunction when the court believes you're going to win. So the courts were clearly believing that we were going to prevail against the EPA back then. Well, as Mark said, the Trump administration rewrote that rule to remain within the law. And now we've got a Biden administration who wants to open that back up again. 2 weeks ago, my administration filed a comment letter with the EPA with regard to this new waters of the U.S., opposing what they were attempting to do. Because when they expand their authority unlawfully, what they are going to do is create more bureaucratic and regulatory burdens for our farmers and ranchers, who already have enough to be able to manage. And frankly, nobody cares more about our land or our waters than we do. Our farmers and ranchers were the original conservationists because they wanted to take their land and pass it on to the next generation. 95% of our farms and ranches here in the state are family owned, many in their 5th or 6th generation. So our farmers and ranchers know the meaning of conservation and how important it is to take care of the land and improve it to pass it on. If we have more bureaucratic entanglements through this waters of the U.S. rule, then what we'll have is more delay on farmers and ranchers actually improving their land. I can tell you from our perspective at the state, we see this. You know, we're trying to expand US 275 into a 4-lane highway. We're not talking about a new route. We're just talking about going from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. And yet the Army Corps of Engineers has insisted upon a full-blown environmental impact study instead of environmental assessment. And that's delayed that project by 12 to 18 months. We could see it when we wanted to increase the dikes around Offutt Air Force Base. It took 6 years to get that permit. Ironically, we got that permit to start moving on that just as the floodwaters came in 2019. So you can see when you create more bureaucratic hassles, you're going to slow things down and you're going to start opening up the possibility that our farmers and ranchers are going to be sued by third parties requiring them to get a permit unnecessarily, thus adding on to their expenses. So this waters of the U.S. rule that we fought back in 2016 is a bad idea. It was a bad idea then. It's a bad idea now. And that's why we need to have a unified voice to push back against it. And now we see the same bad policies coming into the tax code through the repeal of the stepped-up basis. You know, one of the things we've seen from the Biden administration is they want to spend and spend and spend. And to do that, they want to now have to tax and tax and tax. And that's what they want to do. They want to get rid of the stepped-up basis to increase your taxes. And as Mark pointed out, that is going to make it difficult to pass on that family farm and ranch to the next generation. That stepped-up basis is critical. And if we get rid of that, those 4th and 5th and 6th generation family farms are going to struggle and disappear. And that's why it's so important, again, that we have a unified voice pushing back on this administration and all the policies they're putting in place that are going to harm agriculture here in our state. So I'm grateful to be here today with the Farm Bureau and all these other folks who are going to stand up to this administration and tell them they got to stop. They got to stop hurting Nebraska agriculture. We've got to unite, to have a united voice, to have a loud voice. To tell this administration what they are doing is going to undermine our food security in our country, and ultimately that undermines our national security as a nation. These policies are bad for agriculture, and they're bad for our country. And they're certainly going to be bad for Nebraska. Now, our entire federal delegation is on board with us. They support us in pushing back against these bad policies. And we're joined today by one of those members. Our congressman from the 2nd District, Don Bacon, has been, actually for a while, he was the only member of our delegation on an ag committee. And even though the 2nd District includes Omaha, he understands that 20% of our economy is tied to agriculture, and 1 in 4 jobs in our state is tied to agriculture. And that's why, even though he represents our largest urban district, he is a huge supporter of agriculture and sits on that ag committee. Please help me welcome our 2nd District Congressman and a friend of mine, Don Bacon.
Thank you, Governor. Appreciate it. Well, thank you for getting me out of Washington, D.C. and give me the Husker days. I'm in a much better spot. I was raised on a farm. I feel like a kid in a candy store. Lived on a farm until I joined the Air Force in 1985. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to serve on the Agriculture Committee. As the governor says, and I want to thank the governor for the great job he does day in and day out for our state. But as he mentioned, I am on the Ag Committee, and I know the importance of ag to Nebraska. And I have people back in Omaha sometimes say, "What? But there's not a lot of farms in Omaha." Well, we do have in the western part of my district, the southern part, northern part, there are. But the reality is we have a huge agribusiness, whether it's irrigation systems or the pivot irrigation. You got food processing, Gavilon, school. I could just go on and on. We have a huge ag business component. So I'm proud to serve and represent that as well. So today I was asked to speak about a few things. One of the things that are on most people's minds today is these 2 infrastructure bills. We have a $3.5 trillion Bernie Sanders Democratic Socialist gift bag infrastructure bill, where they say a babysitter is considered infrastructure. That's one of the quotes on this bill. That's one of the proposed bills out there. And as the governor said, and as Mark was saying, part of that's involving tax increases. So they're looking at raising the business tax to, on the Senate side and the president's side wanted 28%. The House just came out yesterday with a 26.5%. Regardless, when you add in state corporate tax, it's going to be one of the highest taxes in the world. It's going to 60% of that cost increase goes to consumers. The rest is going to undermine employee pay. And you hear a big sucking sound of businesses leaving our country going overseas because we're less competitive. Part of that is a debate on stepped-up bases. The president right now and the Senate side has stepped-up bases going away. On the House side right now, it's up in the air whether it's going to be in there or not. We got to know that it is devastating to farmers if that stays in. We have on tape the chairman of the Ag Committee, Democrat, saying this would be devastating to farmers, but he wasn't sure that he could keep it out of the bill. We're going to hold his feet to the fire with that term because it is a bad deal. Here's another thing that the House did yesterday, the Democrats. They cut in half the exemptions for the death tax. So in other words, now land values will be cut in half for what will keep you under the death tax punishment there. So we'll keep our eyes on this. We're in the middle of writing this bill. You're not going to get a single Republican vote for this thing. It's bad for America. It's bad for our farmers. Now there's another infrastructure bill. It's really the hard infrastructure bill, $1.2 trillion, really about $550 or $550 billion in new spending. Part of that's going to be dedicated towards rural broadband. I think there's a lot of good in this bill. Wouldn't be the bill that I would write. It's a compromise bill. You got money going to roads, bridges, seaports that we need for our exports, for our agriculture, and about a tenth of it's going to be going towards this rural broadband. And I think there'll be a lot of goodness that comes out of that. And right now, Speaker Pelosi's holding that bill hostage to the $3.5 trillion bill. She wants to link them together, and I think that's a bad mistake. We're also here to talk about WOTUS, or Waters of the U.S. When I ran for Congress in 2015, that was one of the top 3 or 4 issues you would hear in Nebraska. We're calling ditches rivers, we're calling puddles lakes, and we're taking land away from farmers to be able to use them and ranchers. Bad. But under the previous administration, President Trump, we were able to fix that. And it's not been an issue. And now the new administration, the Biden administration, has taken us back to the future, back to the bad. And we'll have to, I appreciate the governor and all the other governors pushing back on this. It does undermine our agriculture. A few other things to throw on the table that have been focus areas. 30 by 30. Nebraska doesn't have that much public land. Where does this land come from? Again, I appreciate the governor here leading efforts to push back on this overreach where you're going to see land be taken away and not made available for feeding the world and feeding our country. I want to mention, too, briefly, when you go around the state, trade always remains a top issue. I haven't heard the new president talk about trade since he's been inaugurated. The previous administration, we went through some tough times doing trade negotiations, but at the end, we started getting trade deals that were good for our ranchers, good for our farmers. We're seeing exports in beef and corn going up. But since January, I have not heard a peep about trade from the new administration. It's time they start representing the Midwest in this area. Finally, I'd like to talk about health care. When I talk to ranchers and farmers, it used to be a farming couple could afford health care. Today we see so many of our spouses having to go to work to pay for health care, and it's wrong. It adds stress to the family. We must keep reforming ACA so that we provide more choices, competitive choices to our farmers and ranchers. It's not fair that you have to have two jobs to take care of a ranch or a farm, and that's what we've left our agriculture today. So let me just close on this. The president's from Delaware, the majority leader in the Senate's from New York, and the Speaker of the House is from San Francisco. They truly do see Nebraska and our agriculture as a flyover state. They do it realistically, but they do it with their policies. And we have to know that their policies are undermining our agriculture industry. So with that, I want to introduce Lance. He is a farmer that wants to keep the farm and the family. Here we go, Rand.
Good morning, everyone. Again, I'm Lance Atwater. I serve on the Nebraska Farm Bureau Board of Directors as our young farmer and rancher representative. And then I'm also a second-generation farmer from just about an hour southeast of here. And that's what I want to talk about today is we've heard a lot about stepped-up basis and the increase in taxes on our farm families and ranch families. So, as I mentioned, I'm a second-generation farmer. And right now, my family, we're going through that period of talking about how we transition the farm to not only me, but as well as my sister. And my sister has a great interest on the farm. She comes back, helps, but she also wants to pursue a different career in the medical field. Now, under the Biden administration, along with its allies, if we eliminate stepped-up basis as well as increased taxes, it's going to make it harder for my sister and I to be able to transition that farm so that we can carry it on into the future. Under their proposal, that if, God forbid, something happened to my parents tomorrow, there is no way my sister and I could afford to pay the taxes, most likely in the six figures range. So that's detrimental to our farm families. It's detrimental to my family. So it's important that we are telling this administration that they're out of touch with what they want to do to raise taxes so that they can pay for their $3.5 trillion social infrastructure bill. We also need to make sure that we're sending the message that with what they're wanting to do, that's not going to keep our farm and ranch families vibrant. Taxing our farm and ranch families more is not what will keep them in business. That's what will drive them out of business. So it's important that we are working with our Congressman Bacon, the rest of our delegation, our governor, and making sure we're sharing our stories about how removing stepped-up basis and increasing taxes on farm and ranch families is detrimental to our state and our economy. So what can you do about that? I'm sure all of you here have either transitioned your farm or are working on that transition farm. This will impact our young farmers and ranchers as we move forward. So what can you do about that? Well, first off, contact your elected representative. Let them know that you do not support increasing taxes on our farm and ranch families, that you want the next generation of our farm and ranch families, the young folks, to be able to succeed moving forward. Secondly, sign the petition with the Nebraskans for Tax Truth, and make sure that we are sending a message to the White House and its allies that we do not support this. And then third, come into the Nebraska Farm Bureau booth and learn more about how you can get engaged to make sure that you are sending the message that we do not support this. Because if we are going to have a vibrant farm economy and vibrant farm and ranch families here in Nebraska, we need to make sure we're doing everything we can to keep the farm and the ranch in the family and not out of the family. And this doesn't just impact farm and ranch families. A lot of people rent land, rent assets from other landlords. I know for us, we have several landlords who have passed their farms on down from 2 generations to 3 generations. Under this proposal, any of the land you rent, as that gets transitioned to the next generation, they most likely would be forced to sell. And if they have to sell, that means that's land now that my family probably won't be able to rent any longer and most likely won't be able to buy. So again, we have to send a clear message that we cannot support the elimination of stepped up basis, and we do not support the increase on taxes on our farm and ranch families. Thank you. Next up is Ken Hurs, past president of the Nebraska Cattlemen.
Thank you, Lance. Appreciate being here. I have a prepared statement I'm going to read just to keep me from rambling. Good morning. My name is Ken Hurs. I'm the immediate past president of the Nebraska Cattlemen. My family and I ranch and farm south of Hastings near Lawrence, Nebraska. I was asked to make a few comments regarding current proposals to eliminate stepped-up basis and other critical tax provisions from farms, ranches, and businesses. My wife Glenda and I have two grown sons, Aaron and Zach, both who have their own operations. We work together cooperatively and share time and equipment, which adds efficiencies to our total operation. I would consider us a medium-sized family farm operation with limited summertime hired help. My wife and I just finished implementing our estate planning. Our hope has always been that our sons inherit our land. While Glenn and I have made payments on our land, our two sons have put in sweat equity ever since they could help. This land is part of our lives. Preserving stepped-up basis is critical to giving our sons, the next generation of farmers and ranchers, the ability to conserve the land that has been part of our family business for years. It is very difficult for beginning farmers and ranchers to secure affordable land to start or expand their operation. The economic impact of a repeal of stepped-up basis on family farms upon death would cause an immediate one-time tax liability equivalent to 280% of the operation's annual income, a burden that would be too large for my sons to overcome. In addition to the detrimental impacts on the family farms and ranches, a study conducted by the Family Business Estate Tax Coalition found that repealing stepped-up basis would result in 80,000 fewer American jobs in each of the next 10 years, and then 100,000 jobs each year thereafter. It would also reduce the gross domestic product $10 billion annually. The 2017 NAS census has found that 1/3 of the producers in the 9th District were over 65 years old. 2/3 of the producers are 55 and older. The federal budget should not be balanced on the backs of the next generation of farmers and ranchers taking over this land, including my sons. Thank you. Next, we have Annie Jobman, a farmer from the Gothenburg with the Nebraska Corn Growers.
Good morning, everybody. Like Ken said, I'm Andy Jobman. I farm near Gothenburg. I'm president for the Nebraska Corn Growers Association. And I'm a fifth generation producer from Gothenburg. And I hope like heck that someday that someone from Lance's family can say that as well. But it is troubling the overreach that we are seeing from the current administration, especially on waters of the U.S. I did not think that we'd be here talking about waters of the U.S. once again, but yet here we are. I think many of us that are standing up here and many of you in the crowd probably find it insulting that a federal agency thinks that producers in Nebraska, the #1 irrigated state in the nation, need help managing their water. And I can't help but think about this last rain that came through and finalized the irrigation season for so many producers. How many puddles and ponds and ephemeral streams ran for a short period of time that really didn't affect anything that was navigable, that would in the future possibly be under regulation. And I think it's just an incredible overreach from the federal government. It creates a workforce problem for the federal government as well. The EPA, no way could they hire enough people to come out across the state, across the nation, and regulate all these perceived problems that we have with these temporal bodies of water. And it's just an incredible problem that I think that we fought in the past very successfully with the Trump administration. They were very helpful in getting some rules wrote under the Navigable Waters Act that made sense. It was common sense. It was reasonable rules. And, I think that the ag community is really stepping up to the plate again very well. Mark and I participated in a testimony via the internet, via Zoom a few weeks ago, and I was very encouraged by the number of agricultural groups that spoke out against opening Pandora's box, basically, and rewriting the waters of the U.S. rule. And I think that's a really great testimony to the folks we have in ag. We're tired of overreach and regulations that become burdensome. I don't have a person on my farm that can go through an additional amount of paperwork, and so I wonder where the time and the resources will be for all the rest of you to do that as well. One thing I'd like to draw to everyone's attention is that the current EPA administrator did meet with many of the ag groups during his appointment process, pledging to work with us, pledging to hear our concerns, pledging to be an advocate for agriculture, and it's time that we hold him to his word. Let's see what kind of response we get from him from our comments. Let's see if he listens to farmers and ranchers across the U.S. Like the governor said, we are the original conservationists. If we don't manage water well on our farms, then we're not going to do well, and we've done that for generations. And again, it's just ironic that the EPA thinks that farmers and ranchers across Nebraska and the rest of the country think that they have more knowledge on the land than what generations of producers in our state as well as the rest of the nation do. So thanks you, Governor. Thanks, Farm Bureau, for having this, and I'll turn it back over to Mark.
Well, thank you, Andy, and thank you for all of those that took time to speak to you this morning. And I just want to say a couple things what we can do. Lance mentioned the first one. Support Nebraskans for Tax Truth Coalition. You can scan your QR code. You can go online at www.nebraskafortaxtruth.org, sign our petition, and let our voices collectively be heard. And then also, lastly, on the waters of U.S., let's tell the EPA to leave our water rule alone. You can visit Common Sense Nebraska Coalition Facebook page. You can sign a petition there to push back. Then also, before we're done, I just want to make sure everybody knows there's going to be a press release released after this event. Senator Fisher, Senator Sass, Congressman Fortenberry, and Congressman Smith will have a video link talking about their support for these two issues as well. I'm grateful for the ag community that's represented here today. They are great, great people. They are the salt of the earth. But I can tell you, as has been mentioned, we cannot stand by and let this administration roll us. And the only way we can let that happen is we got to collectively, this group and you guys in the audience and everybody that's walking around Oscar Harvest Days the next 3 days, we've got to be engaged. So engage on these petitions, let your voice be heard, and we can make a difference. We will be here tomorrow, and we will be here for 100 years as well. So thank you for everyone participating. Thank you for being here.